As we head for the November elections, you have to understand that there is big business involved in politics and big lies and big opportunities, such as how Democratic leaders are exploiting the tragedy in Ferguson, Missouri. I'm going to talk to you about all of that on today's Voice of Resistance.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
Welcome to the program, friend. Anybody watching what's going on in Ferguson has obviously been grieved for the loss of life. Also, perhaps some people would be grieved at the race baiting that's going on, at the trial of this police officer before any evidence has been heard. Now evidence has come forward, witnesses have come forward saying that Michael Brown punched him in the car. I mean, there's just a lot going on. But what I want to focus on for a moment before we run a two-part series on the business of politics is that there are horrific crimes going on in Chicago, in Detroit, in New York City, unthinkable amounts of black-on-black crime, which is horrific. It's a tragedy. But the truth of the matter is that if the officer who shot Michael Brown had been African American, most of us would never have heard about it because that type of thing sadly happens regularly. And nearly 50% of all murders committed in America are committed by young black men, according to one statistic I recently heard on the news. All of that to say this. Obama, Al Sharpton, Eric Holder, that wicked man, they are using this tragedy to mobilize their base for the 2014 general election. You need to understand that. They wait for an opportunity like this and they pounce on it. They're not going to the south side of Chicago to deal with the horrific murders that are taking place there on a nearly daily basis. Why? Because it doesn't get their base out to vote in the general election in 2014. Up until this Ferguson tragedy, there is a lot of lethargy in the Democratic Party. There's a lot of discontent with Obama and his policies. And now they have an opportunity to make this about race again, about the injustice of white people against black people. No matter what, whether the cop was right or wrong, it doesn't even matter to them. They've got the narrative, they've got the story. So please understand, enormous sums of money are about to be raised off of this, and they're doing what they're doing, not just to call for justice for Michael Brown, because maybe the officer was in the right. We'll find out. But they're doing it so that they can mobilize their base. Hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the program, friend. Who are the most powerful political people in America today? Well, some would argue people like President Obama, and clearly that would be true. But how about David Axelrod? In other words, it's not just the guy who gets into office that's powerful, but it's the guy or the guys or the women who put him there. The gatekeepers. It's actually a class of people right now. They're very rich, they're very wealthy, and they dominate Washington, D.C. They're called consultants, political consultants, campaign managers, speech writers, statisticians, people who will look at a candidate, look at a race, and then try and figure out a way, craft a plan, a strategy of how to get that man or woman in office or how to keep them there. They make exorbitant sums of money. They determine more U.S. political policy, legislative policy, than most of us would care to picture. And they're out of our reach. No one elected them. They're paid exorbitant sums of money to help get people into office, some of whom are as evil as the first cousin of Beelzebub. Okay? But they're paid to keep that from us. and to give political facelifts and to frame debates and arguments in a way that seduce and deceive we the people. I would proffer the idea that probably right now, the most famous political consultant is this man, Karl Rove. You've seen him before on television. Karl Rove was a fairly unknown political consultant in Texas who masterminded former Governor George Bush's advent to the White House. Karl Rove, by the way, look at this picture of Karl Rove. And now look at this picture of, yes, the devil. Do you see the similarities? Do you note that there is a strong family resemblance? I'm not making any accusations. I leave it to you, the viewer, to discern just how close those two actually are. Anyway, Karl Rove was a fairly unknown political consultant in Texas. He masterminded George Bush's ascendancy to the White House. And then he leveraged that after serving President Bush as a political consultant for 8 years. He leveraged that into a multi-million-dollar empire. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, in which he picks candidates, grooms candidates, gets candidates put in office, hopefully, tries to win elections. After this past election cycle, and during the election cycle, a real spitting match began to emerge. First in 2010, you might remember him fighting publicly with Sarah Palin. But in 2012, it went into earnest as he, Karl Rove, began to publicly berate the Tea Party and say that the Tea Party was going to cost the Republican Party seats, that the Tea Party's agenda was counterproductive to the interests of the Republican Party. And of course, when Todd Aiken and Richard Murdoch had their difficulties, well, we'll talk about that when we come back from the break. Who is Aiken? Who is Murdoch? Think. All right, this will be a little quiz. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about Karl Rove. We're going to read some passages from a very famous book, The Prince by Machiavelli. Don't go away.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah.
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
Why does a nice guy like me keep getting thrown in jail? I have been arrested almost 50 times and spent over a year of my life locked up in various prison facilities. And I wrote a book, many books. In fact, one of them is called Why Does a Nice Guy Like Me Keep Getting Thrown in Jail? It's a theological work, answering those who say that the church should not be involved in politics or that we should retreat. I encourage you to get it. In fact, get one and give it to your pastor. Welcome to the program again, friends. If you just joined me, we're talking about Karl Rove and the fight going on with the Tea Party and principled conservatives within the Republican Party and some of the people on the fringe of the establishment. Karl Rove, let me make a couple more comments, then I'm going to read to you from the famous book, The Prince. Karl Rove, one of my staff said to me, you've got to compliment Karl Rove. Pay him some compliment. Okay, you ready? Here it comes. Karl Rove is a brilliant statistician. And the Nazis built brilliant roads in the Autobahn. Okay? Being a good statistician means nothing about ethics. And as we will see in today's show and perhaps another one, Karl Rove is committed to attacking Christian ethics while hiding the very fact of what he's doing. One other thing I want to say to you. Polling data is critical, okay? And so what Karl Rove does is he looks for questions and looks for issues, polls various ways that they can be addressed, and then tries to slide people into office by getting 50% of the vote plus one in any given race. The problem is that he puts polling and party and power ahead of principle. Principle means nothing to him. He would have no problem having a maniacal baby killer in office, somebody who has no qualms killing the unborn. He would have somebody in office who supported sodomite marriage. It means nothing to him. What matters to him is power, getting it and retaining it. So a man like that is a danger. He's a danger to liberty, he's a danger to life, and he's a danger to our families. Because at the end of the day, he will pretend to be a good man and pretend to put in conservatives when in fact he has no such intentions. In fact, the name of his new group is the Conservative Victory Project. Think about that. The Conservative Victory Project. He doesn't even want conservatives, but he's willing to have that name in his pack. Why? To deceive, to seduce, to get money. Now, let's read a couple of short passages from a brilliant book, and by brilliant, I mean genius, that is in part demonically inspired. I'm talking about the book The Prince, written by Niccolò Machiavelli. He's a good Italian man. Mangia, Niccolò, mangia. He wrote this for the Medici family in Florence when he was out of favor, and basically all he had was his knowledge of the state. So he wrote this treatise called The Prince. It has survived for hundreds of years. It is still widely read in colleges, and it's widely read and used in political circles. And Karl Rove is without question a Machiavellian expert, at least in behavior. Let me read a couple of passages you'll find interesting. Machiavelli said, "It is necessary to know well how to disguise this characteristic." It was the characteristic of being both a lion and a fox, somebody who would crush opposition and deceive people. It is necessary to know how to disguise this characteristic and to be a great pretender and dissembler. That means hypocrite. And men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. He went on to say, "Therefore, it is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I have enumerated, good ethical qualities. It's not even necessary for a prince to have those good qualities, but it is very necessary to appear to have them. And I shall dare to say this also, that to have them and always to observe them, good qualities, is injurious." Are you hearing what he's saying? It's injurious. If you're a good man and you have good qualities and you actually have an ethical compass and you try to always follow it, it will injure you. It will be a problem for you. Do you think God believes that? You think that that's what the Christian church teaches and the scriptures teach? That ethics are just there to be used, but when ethics are a problem, get rid of them because they're going to injure you. He said, to always observe them is injurious, and that to appear to have them is useful. To appear merciful, faithful, humane, religious, upright, and to be so, but with a mind so framed that you should require not to be so, you may be able and know how to change to the opposite. In other words, have all of these characteristics around you as ornaments, as tinsel, and be ready to cast them aside at any minute, because it's easy to deceive people. That, my friend, is Karl Rove. And by the way, if Karl Rove gets his way, God save this country if he does. This is what the Republican Party will look like. Go ahead, Andrew, roll that tape. It's going to look like some crazy demon-possessed snake that is devouring itself. Karl Rove, you can take your godless agenda to the hot place from whence it came. And by the way, maybe on the elevator ride there, you can get your own paperback copy of The Prince. Enjoy the reading before it bursts into flames. I'll be right back, friend. I want to read to you a passage from the Bible that contradicts Machiavelli and Karl Rove. In social revolution, peaceful social revolution, there are rules. And those rules have been established by social revolutions of the past, and the Christian community in America has failed to obey a lot of those rules, and that's why we keep losing. I put together Insurrecta Next, a 14-part television series on the history and the theology of social revolution. I encourage you to watch it. It will make you a force for righteousness, for social revolution. Welcome back, friend. I'm going to read to you from the scriptures in a minute, but I want to point something out. The Democratic Party circles their wagons around one another whenever there's a problem. Karl Rove and some of his henchmen and political assassins will throw someone under the bus as quickly as they can, especially if it's somebody who has an ethical, unwavering commitment to a biblical principle like being pro-life and wanting to save babies. Look at the two examples. You had Todd Akin running against Claire McCaskill in Missouri, and then you had, what was the Murdoch guy's name? Richard Murdoch running against Joe Donnelly in Indiana. Sadly, Murdoch and Akin both kind of stepped in it, put their foot in their mouth when they poorly discussed the fact that even children who are conceived in horrible ways deserve to be protected by law. We don't kill babies for the crimes of their fathers, okay? We could talk about executing rapists. That'd be another great show to have. But the point being, Murdoch and Akin said things that they could have said better. And what did Karl Rove and his henchmen do? They said, pull out of the race, resign, get away from us. They denounce them. They mock them. And then after the election, Karl Rove blamed the Tea Party and pro-lifers for the loss of those two seats, which the GOP should have picked up for the Senate. Well, Karl Rove, by the way, had 12 candidates that he backed. 10 of them lost. After the election, I think it was Donald Trump who mocked Karl Rove and said, hey, Karl, how to blow $400 million. Just mocked him flat out. And he deserved to be mocked. All right, I've got to read from the scriptures, all right? You've heard what Machiavelli says, or Machiavelli if you want to say the Italian way. And now let me read to you what God said through his servant King David. Now these are the last words of David, the oracle of David, son of Jesse, the oracle of the man whom God exalted, the anointed of the God of Jacob, the favorite of the strong one of Israel. So God really likes David, clearly. The Spirit of the Lord speaks through me. His word is upon my tongue. The God of Israel has spoken. The Rock of Israel has said to me, this is what God says, one who rules over people justly, ruling in the fear of God, is like the light of morning, like the sun rising on a cloudless morning, gleaming from the rain on the grassy land. And then in verse 6 it says, but the godless are all like thorns that are thrown away, for they cannot be picked up with the hand. To touch them, one uses an iron bar or a shaft of a spear, and they are entirely consumed in fire on the spot. All right, let me ask you a question. What kind of political leaders do you want? Do you want political leaders who reflect the ethics and the devotion of King David, or of Karl Rove and Niccolo Machiavelli and the Prince? We can't have it both ways. And it requires discernment on our part because men like Karl Rove are committed to deceiving us into thinking we're getting a King David when in fact we might be getting some abominable wretch. When we come back from this break, I'm going to give you a little tool for a litmus test to help you, a couple tools actually, so that you and I don't get seduced. Don't go. Can wicked rulers be allied with thee, who frame mischief by statute? They band together against the life of the righteous and condemn the innocent to death. But the Lord has become my stronghold, and my God, the rock of my refuge. He will bring back on them their iniquity and wipe them out for their wickedness. The Lord our God will wipe them out. It took me 14 years to write it. 4 rewrites, countless edits. I poured my heart and soul into Dragon Slayers. It points a very inspiring and painful book to write. I encourage you to go to our website and look at the reviews that we have gotten from readers of this book, and then avail yourself. It's an allegory, and I promise you, you'll be inspired. All right, on one hand, you've got people like Karl Rove who are deliberately setting out to deceive people and to get power at all costs, following the paradigm of Machiavelli and the Prince. And then you have people who are principled pro-lifers, principled Tea Party activists who are pro-life, by the way, and they're trying to get people in power. Ultimately, this is a struggle for power, all right? The question is, do we have people in power who are governing from the unchanging ethics of the laws of God and the ethics of Christianity, or do we have people who don't give a rat's behind about ethics? They only care about power for the sake of power itself. To the righteous man, power is a means to justice. To the unrighteous man, power is its own end. All right, here's my suggestions for you. Number 1, don't give any money to any PAC, period. Hear me out. A political action committee is designed to take your money, and then it's got its huge support staff and its massive budget, overhead, fundraising costs, and then trickle out a few dollars to candidates. Don't trust how they spend your money. Figure out which candidates you like and give them money. All right? End of story. If you look at some of the right-wing PACs and who they have gotten behind, it would break your heart. The easiest example is the Susan B. Anthony Fund, who says it's this great champion of pro-life and of the unborn. And it got behind, gave money to, and praised the victory of Scott Brown in Massachusetts when he ran for the empty Senate seat after Ted Kennedy died. Scott Brown was a supporter of Roe versus Wade. He was a baby killer. And a supposedly pro-life group gave hard-earned dollars of pro-life advocates to a baby killer. All right? Just don't give money to PACs anymore. And here's the second thing. Don't believe phrases. If someone says, I'm pro-life, okay, somebody you might want to vote for or give money to, you have to have the discipline to contact them and say, does that mean that you would vote to make it a criminal act from conception until birth to kill a human being? Yes or no? Would you vote to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn human being from conception till birth? Then you decide if you support it. Well, friend, you can see that I'm a nonpartisan when I go into this, focusing on Karl Rove, focusing on the Republicans. Please, this coming window into the election, beware. There are people who make enormous sums of money to deceive you. Don't take the bait. Just keep watching this show. Go to our website to learn more.